I can't sound like a boxing promoter, but the next session is a heavyweight contest between two of the jungle animals in the ITSM world, Chris Dancy and the IT Skeptic, Rob England. So this is what we've been waiting for this morning. So they're going to be on stage shortly, very kindly sponsored by APMG International. And it's actually the first time they've ever been in the same ring together, sorry, on stage together. We have a very eloquent referee who will referee the contest in the character of Barclay Ray. And you are going to be able to cheer for one or the other, not physically, but in an electronic way. So if I can have the chart, the score chart up on the screen, I'll show you exactly how. You have a choice. You can either text, Chris 13 or Rob 13 to that phone number there. Can you make mine shorter? No. and basically that's charged at standard rate, so that's the expensive way of doing it. You can tweet, pull in a keyword to what? Just tweet at pull in a keyword. That seems like which will be Chris 13 or Rob 13. Chris the very long one, Rob the very short one. Save, no comment. Or submit responses on the internet through that address at the end, pollev.com/SDI13. So we'll leave that up during the brawl, fright, whatever. And it will track what you're thinking about the two participants. The other thing you'll be able to do is tweet questions in to #Rumble. So #Rumble, R-U-M-B-L-E. I could see Tessa was a bit dodgy with her spelling, but others are out there maybe as well. So that's your opportunity. So to introduce the fight, there's a short video followed by an introduction from your referee. I'll leave them to it.
We present the Rumble in Birmingham, a clash of ITSM titans debating the future for our industry and what to do about it now. Live in front of you on stage, you'll hear two sets of opinions debated by two of the industry's most innovative and prolific personalities. From the USA and the future, the world's most quantified man, dynamic soothsayer and futures for ITSM, Chris Dancy. And from somewhere very far away indeed, New Zealand, the IT Skeptic, Rob England. Both men will have 7 minutes to tell you about their vision and understanding of the future for IT, ITSM and Service Desk. They'll also both then have 7 minutes to explain what they think you should be doing to prepare for that future. I'm Barclay Ray, my role is timekeeper, facilitator, referee and perhaps first aider. I'll also be ringing the bell. There may be tears, there will be passion, engagement and awakening. Let the games commence.
I'm a skeptic. I challenge irrational and unproven thinking wherever I find it. And as the IT skeptic, I do that for our industry. We're an immature industry, we run after anything shiny and new. Whereas the reality is that IT is a job, it's not our money. We're paid to protect and serve the information and technology assets of the organisation. The IT Skeptic's role is to bring us back to the reality of real IT for real people in the real world.
We are bombarded with the future. Words like daggers are constantly thrown at us. BYOD, consumerization, the debt to the CIO, the next version of the service desk. There's too much going on. We have to take control of this madness today. For many of us, we are the first generation of IT workers. We're the only industry in the human race to have our pioneers still alive while we're employed. The president is all about customer service, and that's not about value. That's about being in service to each other. And finally, we have to stop making people tech dependent and start making people tech enabled. We need definitive answers and leadership today. And for the record, avoiding the present is the new clinging to the past.
Oh, goodness. Here we go.
Welcome to the Rumble. Just like to add to what Howard said and to thank our sponsors of this event, of this session, which is APMG International. Thank you very much for that. And
they're voting already.
They're voting already. Rob, Chris, I don't know what you've done, but it's working.
It's my heart rate.
So just to remind you that if you have specific questions, it's best if you tweet them. I'll pick them up during the session, and we can have them at the end rather than running around with mics. So let's commence. Can I ask Chris to begin the debate, talking about the future, as you do? 7 minutes to give us your...
Can we just have a coin toss?
You can, if you want to go first, you can go first, but let's talk about the future. You've got 7 minutes to give us your crystallized view of where you think that's going to go.
All right. So I think before I say any of this, I'd like to thank SDI and APMG for allowing this to happen and you guys for being there. Rob and I have been friends for a few years now, and we actually agree on almost everything. There's a perception we don't, and that's what you're going to get to watch today. So I just want to be real upfront. I'm not comfortable with this. But apparently people want to see a fight, so if this is the closest our people get to reality TV, God bless us. You know, when we talk about the future, your timing now? You know, when we talk about the future, I just want to say, regardless of what I say today, obey laws, you know, period. Just nothing else. Everything I say, make sure you're always obeying the law. But around that and after that, I think it's important to break up things into very manageable areas to talk about the future. And I think, you know, firstly, when it comes to people. So in my career, we've done a really unfortunate job in relating to each other and creating this either us and them mentality, or it's been referred to as the cult of the customer. And as someone who's worked in lots of different jobs in IT, and I hear someone talk about, but the customer this and the customer that, I think it's so very important that in the future we focus on us. We're the customer. We actually have to focus on, does it make sense for us before we can even have the ability to focus on someone else. Additionally, I think when we look at people, you know, we definitely dealt with super users in the 90s and in the 2000s, but I think we're looking at a different breed of people now, almost supreme users in some ways. They come armed with not just information that they look up, but I know specific examples where I'll call a service desk and I know the answer just to mess with someone. And I don't think that I'm unique. You know, when you work in tech and you're used to support, you have a certain set of expectations. So we need to be aware and we need to be trained to deal with people who probably sometimes don't have a problem. They're either lonely or they just want to challenge our very talent. Speaking of talent, we need to focus on talent retention. You know, too many people come into tech or come into IT or information systems and leave, or they migrate or they become management. And I think we need to really look at that structure and partner with human resources. Human resources, if you just do some real simple searches online, they face the same issues that IT do, but we think we're somehow unique. And then finally, I think in training people, I don't think we do an adequate job at preparing people for the future, which is kind of, you know, what we would call today's present. We need to help people understand the role in which they're providing to the organization and a context that makes sense to them. As far as processes, yeah, I think there's a urgent need to abandon this whole idea of processes. We need to look at them and simplify them. Look at a process and take away everything that's not essential. You know, Johnny Ives, when he talks about Apple products, he talks about removing everything but the absolute bare essentials. And I haven't seen that happen a lot in my. So I think in the future, we need to focus on removing away things from processes and seeing what the minimum viable process would be. Development people call it the minimum viable product. And I think there's room for us to take that road. Value seems to be something that's being screamed around, you know, value, value, value. I don't think value is something that we can create. I think it's only something we can take away from. It's like trust, it's always there until you remove from it, and then it's a real struggle to get it back. I think our tools in the future need to be more reflective. So right now, if you look at a tool like self-service, which I think we should kill self-service immediately, and I think self-service doesn't exist in the future. Self-service right now is just one of these tools where I can log in and see all the times I had a problem or all the times I had to beg for something. And I don't think that's a relationship your end user wants with your tool, and I don't think it's a relationship that's healthy for the tool or the end user. When I log in, I want to see everything I've done with the support systems. I want to see a complete timeline, that sort of thing. Something very reflective, something that makes me feel like I'm smart, not like all the things I didn't know. I would like to see open self-service if we're going to do something with it. So if I submit an issue, I think in the future, other people should be able to interact with that. When it comes to data, we need to really reevaluate our idea of dashboards. You know, they say brakes don't allow you to stop, they allow you to go faster. I think dashboards are used as a weapon. I think we need to get rid of dashboards, and we need to look at maybe personal analytics in that sense, and allow people to define in the future what's important to them on the service desk. Is that 7?
That's not even 7, but that's great. You're still sitting up there, 65%. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you. I have more.
Keep going.
Well, I don't know how much time I have.
You've got 3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes? Okay, good. Can I keep going?
All right.
What? Yeah. So that's dashboards killing. They don't exist in the future. Knowledge management doesn't exist in the future. Unstructured data is too powerful right now. We have ways to harness it. We have too many loose knowledge systems within our organizations. Most people store documents in their email. Most of their time during the day is looking for old email. I think, and then we build these brilliant, and I love knowledge bases. I mean, but I think they need to be very personal, and that's why I like the concept of a knowledge locker that Rob talked about the other day. We need to stop surveying people. You survey land, you don't survey humans. Yeah, it was funny. The people who take surveys, you don't want them answering questions. They've got too much time on their hands. And the people you want to get the answers from will never take a survey. So we need to find some better way of doing this. Now, I'm not advocating putting a sensor on every single person in the world, but I think it's a good start. And a lot of call centers are already using sensors for motion, voice, ambient voice. You don't need to listen to record phone calls. Right? A very simple sensor to see if someone talks faster or someone raises their voice tells you more than the words they used. So I think a quantified service desk is something that's very, very future. I talk personally about a quantified enterprise. Something that I think doesn't exist in the future are words like manage, manage this. And the nomenclature in IT has, I think, wrecked it completely. Too many people get caught up with, did you do this? And they use a certain amount of special words, and I think normal tech people just go, what are you talking about? Or they feel inferior, and I don't think we really do a lot to support each other in that role. And I guess last but not least, second to not at least, stop reading and sharing silliness in the future. Don't send each other links about important trends in the industry. You're the industry. You don't need some data from some analyst or some report or some survey or some metric. I think that you can be the best steward of that information. And then bring your own device and all the drama around bring your own device. Again, always obey laws. But at this point, it's really say, if you told me not to bring my own device to work, do you know how much I'd have to take off? And you can have device management in a responsible manner. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Rob England, the IT Skeptic. What's your view of the future?
Well, it's just in the last few days, actually, I've decided what my next book is going to be, after the one I'm working on now, is The Sky's Not Falling. So one of the issues that I'm getting, in fact, it's driving me just about demented lately in our industry, is all of these dire predictions for the future about IT will be gone within 5 years, and it's the end of the physical conference, and BYOD will destroy X, and X as a service will destroy Y, and we can be really apocalyptic in our industry. People love. There's a new character on the blog called Chicken Ittle, spelled ITLE, right? Who, satirizes the people who run around screaming, the sky's falling, the sky's falling. And I think there's way, way too much of that in our industry. First of all, a lot of that comes from extrapolating curves. So people look at a trend and they assume the trend is going to continue, and they draw the line either linearly or exponentially to say it's going to continue. And one of Chris's mates, Ray Kurzweil, is really good at this. And there's the analogy that they use called the chessboard analogy. Do you know this one? Where you put 1 grain of wheat on the first square of the chessboard and 2 grains of wheat on the second square of the chessboard and 4 on the third and so on. And so that Kurzweil talks about the second half of the chessboard, that the curves are all going exponential, or in fact for the chessboard it's geometric for the mathematicians in the room. But these curves are going like this, Moore's law and blah, 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 blah. And that, so therefore we're approaching the second half of the chessboard where things are just multiplying in this extraordinary manner. But, the analogy ignores the fact that long before you got to the second half of the chessboard, there would be wheat pissing everywhere. There's no way you'd even be able to count how many grains you had on each square. And by the time you got to the second half of the chessboard, the pile of wheat would be bigger than Mount Everest. You couldn't find the chessboard, and you couldn't get to the end of the chessboard because there isn't enough wheat on Earth. So the point is that you can extrapolate all the curves you want. In the real world, and that's my world, the real world, you can't do the chessboard thing. And every trend that people are forecasting into the future is going to hit a physical constraint at some point. Even Moore's law, which once again has escaped that and leapt into another layer where, so it's for now not going to. But every trend will ultimately meet a physical constraint. You cannot extrapolate models linearly or exponentially or geometrically into the future and expect them to continue that way. It's just how the real world works. And every scientist knows that. So my first concern is extrapolation being used to project the future, because I think that's unrealistic. And then my second concern is that, as I said, Moore's law has escaped that phenomenon for now and looks like it's going to keep going for another decade of amazing growth. So technology is running away. But this isn't technology. This room isn't technology, right? This room is people. And IT is about people, and real IT is about people interacting with information. So technology can change as fast as it likes, but there's a human rate of change. And I think that we're rapidly approaching the limit of the human rate of change. So that if you look at the human behaviours in real IT, now when I talk about real IT, I'm talking about the application of information technology to business. So I think that another thing that people do too much is they confuse their personal digital experience with real IT. So just because the device in your hand has changed so extraordinarily in the last decade, how much has the IT back in real IT changed in the last decade? Not very much at all, right? And I've got clients that are still running Unisys mainframes. So what your personal digital experience is doing is really interesting, but don't go confusing that with real IT. And so real IT is changing at a much slower pace, and it's changing because it's about large, complex systems of people. And it's about large cultures and large organizations, and they don't change fast. So if you want to look 5, 10 years in the future and say, what is real IT going to look like? I'll tell you it's going to look much like it looks today. Some of the devices are going to be really fizzy and cool that the personal individuals are walking around with in their hands, but how different is your organization going to be in 10 years? Not so much. So what will change is we are on this steady trend to outsourcing, right? But then again, those of us who've been around long enough remember sunrise, sunset, outsource, insource, outsource, and I think we'll see the same trend that the cloud, there'll be, people will at some point go, maybe this isn't the best idea in every situation, and we'll start seeing a bit of a flow back to insource. But yes, we will have this continual growth towards outsource, but how rapidly can your organisation change to do this? So I'm working with one of the biggest government departments in New Zealand, and they're working to a model where they want to outsource everything. So they've got a 5-year plan to restructure their organisation to a SOA type structure so that they can actually have services to outsource. They're on a 5-year journey to restructure themselves. I don't believe that they'll get there in anywhere less than 10. They're dreaming because of the complexity of their legacy systems, the complexity of their culture, the complexity of their processes. Yes, they're working towards it, but if I project what they're going to look like in 10 years' time, I bet you they still have the Unisys mainframe. So, and then we'll see other trends. BYOD absolutely is going to grow. It's an unstoppable thing. And so we need to work really quickly to put the mitigation in place to manage that. We'll see decentralization, the business going and doing its own thing, but there's going to be some fabulous horror stories with that. There are going to be some stupendous horror stories and a growth of governance to try and get these people under some sort of control. And the last thing is we'll see Devops having an influence on what we do with its concepts flowing back into real IT. But once again, will we all be doing DevOps in 5 years' time? Not a chance. Will people in greenfield sites that are building fizzy web apps be doing DevOps? You betcha. Will my real clients in real IT be doing it? No, they'll be picking up some of the ideas to try and go a bit faster.
Thank you very much.
Nobody liked that message. Come on, people, vote.
Just to remind you to vote as you go, you've got the information up there as to tweet at poll with the keyword.
It just proves
Chris 13 or Rob 13.
It just proves people don't like to hear the truth. Look at that.
You can't handle the truth.
This can't be a debate where you just say, I just lied. Because if you want to go there, we can do ugly. I'm American, we do ugly well.
I meant the hard facts of life.
Oh, okay, that's different than the truth.
Could I ask the second presentation, and we'll go into more of a fluid debate.
Yeah, when are we doing that? I'm ready.
You ready for that?
This is no longer uncomfortable. This is no longer.
I was going to say, this is the guy that didn't want to do it. Now he's got
So what's your, I mean, there is clear polarization there in terms of looking at and vision of the future. Rob's saying it's we're still going to be doing the same stuff in 10 years. How do you respond to the world that you live in, Chris? How do you
I live in our world. I don't think there's a real world and a not real world. I don't know the two worlds you're speaking of. I live in a world that we're all in. There are people in that world who behave differently, to your point, but I mean there are successful huge government programs. The military complex, unfortunate but huge, and it operates. I think one of the biggest stories of the year was in America we have, what would seem to be a scandal, but the surveillance with PRISM. How did we pull that off? I mean, that was pretty crazy. I mean, if you think about the tech they have behind PRISM, we couldn't do that in the tax code, but we can surveil people with it. So
there's 20 years of work gone into PRISM. I was working on those systems 15 years ago, right? I'm not allowed to tell you what database it all runs on, but it's a database that has existed for 20-something years, right? We're not talking about something they put in place overnight like that. This is legacy technology, massive legacy technology. So,
I think in some ways, I agree with you, but you can't deny exponential thinking. I mean, we shouldn't have a debate on quantum physics, although I would like to.
Well, as a trained physicist, I'd be delighted to talk to you about quantum physics.
And as someone who continued reading after I went to school, I would like to. Textbooks update now, like automatically. It's really neat.
The question for the second part, really, and we don't need to go into the formal bit so much, but it was, what do we do now about the future?
Well, we don't have to really worry, I don't think, so much about the future. And I agree, I agree with Rob on everything he said. I mean, I don't see any difference, because I think two people do scream that the sky is falling. I don't think the things I say about the future are hyperbolic. I think they're just observations. You can make them hyperbolic, you can read into it, but I usually look at most people with they're coming at you with the intent of goodness. But some of the things I think we can do now are just some of the organizations that I've been privileged to interview or be a part of. And one of the exciting things I heard about was that, has anybody heard of Rackspace? They're a cloud hosting company. So one of the things Rackspace did about 3 years ago was they rewarded shadow IT. So if you came forward and said you had a sneaky, not allowed system, they gave you accolades and said, why are you using it? And then they explained it, and then they used the reason they were using these systems. And how this all found out was the guy was running a server under his desk to manage a bunch of client data. It crashed, and major parts of the business went down. And you know, there's this police state in IT in some ways, where you know we have to keep things locked away. And that organization, and I encourage you to just go online and look up Rackspace and some of the things they've done around shadow IT. I think that's pretty amazing. Some other things I think we can do now, just to help control cost and empower people. Intel's CIO, Kim Stevenson, who was on one of my podcasts, she put vending machines all over campus. So if there were certain peripherals that you needed, you would just get them. I mean, there was no request process, no, you just got them because they were cheap enough and easy enough for people to get. And I think finally, you know, I could go on and on with things you could do today, but that's not really what I do anymore. Is really look at the tools that we're using. You know, we have this massive disconnect when it comes to how we log incidents and how we manage systems, and actually the tools themselves. And one of the things I see missing from tools today that really bothers me is this sense of profile. You know, in every other system you use in life, you have some way of looking up information about something. But as an IT person, the only real system we've ever had is Active Directory. And I've joked for years that Active Directory is neither. And I don't know, I'll let that wait for a moment. But I don't know why we haven't evolved some more robust system of understanding users. I watched Hornbill the other day. It showed me something where it showed the user's happiness level. And I've seen other vendors, Landesk does some really interesting stuff with this. I mean, all the vendors, BMC does, I mean, I could go, it's weird. You name one vendor, then you have to name them all, and then there's no debate. You know, but they all do interesting things, but I'd like to see people go to that next step. You know, again, it's one thing for me to see all the things I begged for or didn't do well, but as someone who's worked on a desk, I would have loved to see more about that person, what projects they're working on, you know, what volume of email do they send, you know, how often do they call? Do they call in the morning? Do they call at the night? You know, information that would really help me understand that person. And then I think the last thing that we really need to focus on, you know, new and shiny, to Rob's point, you know, I'm sorry, Rob, is mobility. I think contextual awareness in our devices is important. If your phone is smarter than the tool you run on the desk, we have a problem. And your phone knows where you are, it can record sound, it can take pictures, yet we're pushed into either cloud systems or systems that are locally based that are just horrifically, simply dumb, you know, just these dramatic forms that we run business rules against. And the largest form collector we have is in our mobile device. It's constantly collecting data. And I think that if we don't take advantage of that, I'll just give you a prime example. I have a lot of files, like you all do, right? And I can't find stuff as easily as I should be able to. So I started saying, well, how could I make stuff more accessible? Well, now when I need a presentation or a document, most of the systems I use now are location and time-based. So I left my presentation for this event here. I was in Denver, but I geotagged it for here. And I geotagged it for yesterday. So when I showed up, I didn't look on my hard drive. It was here at that moment. When you abandon file systems and you abandon folders and email and you work with the world around you, I don't think that's an unreal world. I think that's an adaptive world that's empowering. Now, I don't think it's for everyone, but I think it's something as knowledge workers, and we owe it to ourselves to start to think about and help each other understand these systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Rob, what's your take on that? What do you think we should be doing now?
I think there are some things we need to resist at the moment, and one of those is driven by the personal digital experience. So there are expectations being placed on us. There is a sense of entitlement to IT at certain levels, and those expectations are being driven by stuff like Apple and Rackspace and Amazon and people like that, and their business, their user base saying to real IT, if Apple can have Genius bars in every shop, why can't we have Genius bars at work? And if devices can self-configure, why can't our legacy apps just show up on my iPhone? And it shows a complete failure to understand the real IT, to understand that Apple, their whole business model is premised on over-servicing the user at a cost premium, right? So they charge for their eye candy, and they use that money to provide stupendous levels of service to their customers. Great, okay, boss, you start charging the organisation for IT at a 20% premium, and we'll give you your jolly Genius bar, no problem at all. But on the current budgets you're giving us, we're not Apple. Hello, reality calling, right? So there's this expectation of entitlement being set by the personal digital experience, which does not relate to the real IT in most of the organisations that I work in, because we're being asked to do more with less. We're not being asked to operate on an eye candy budget, right? So we need to resist some of that thinking that comes from the personal digital experience. The other thing that I'm seeing is that IT exists to protect and to serve. I love that American police slogan, to protect and serve, right? That's what we're there for, two things, and there's a tension between the two. We are the stewards of the existing investment in information and technology. And that investment is a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar asset in the organisations that we work in real IT. And it's a legacy asset, and it's our job to protect it, to secure it, to keep it safe, to make sure that it retains its value going forwards. At the same time, we're expected to serve, which is to deliver new value to the business, to respond to change, to react and deliver, okay? And there's a massive tension between that, because the serve, BYOD, is the perfect example, right? Absolutely, it's an irresistible force that's thundering down on us, but that doesn't mean that we open up our existing assets to uncontrolled devices on day one, because we have this duty to protect the existing asset. We have this duty to the governors and owners of the organisation to ensure that that existing informational system is not corrupted or compromised by personal devices, right? So see the tension there. We have to respond as quickly as we can to facilitate BYOD, to make it possible against those legacy systems. But at the same time, the users have to be told, no, we are not ready to open those systems to your personal device. And so there's this constant tension. So one of the things I talk about is slow IT. And this is about the demands that are raining down on IT from the business, the lack of portfolio management, service portfolio management, to say, are we making reasonable demands on what our IT systems can deliver this year and next year and the year after? And I don't see it happening. I see, certainly in New Zealand, I see customers of mine as a consultant where the IT department's got more concurrent active IT projects than they've got damn people in the IT department, right? They're drowning. I talk about eating ourselves alive with the projects that the organisation is demanding of us. They're demanding so much of us that we are crumbling. How many people in this room see that in your or organisations around you? Right? We cannot continue to deliver at the pace at which it's being demanded of us by the world. And that comes from that sense of entitlement, from the confusion of the personal digital experience. And the only way we can resist that is to do some decent portfolio management, and the only way we can do service portfolio management is to have proper governance of IT, and it's not happening. And so we need to drive governance of IT into the organisation, into the executives, into the boards, and into the owners of those organisations to say, you are failing in your duty. You are failing in your obligations to IT to govern it properly. You are not providing direction. and you are not listening to them as a trusted advisor and evaluating what they say to you when they say, you are killing us, we cannot continue. It's that human rate of change thing again. We are maxed out on the human rate of change dial. In most of the IT organisations that I deal with, in real IT, we are maxed out. No, you can't have a bloody genius bar because we've got 146 concurrent projects on the go already, right? That's the real world, and that's what we need to be doing today to deal with the future as it comes. We need to have proper service portfolio management driven by proper governance of IT so that this stuff can come at us at a controlled rate. Then, quid pro quo, scratch of the back, if you slow down your demands on us as IT, we will speed up our ability to fulfill the stuff that does come to us. So we need fast IT to respond to slow IT. You with me? The business needs to ask for slow IT, we need to do fast IT. So that's stuff like Devops, but there's also stuff like really basic stuff, standard change, you know, and software as a service and XaaS, you know, outsourcing cloud, and all the service aggregation that goes. We can do all that stuff. Absolutely, we can do that stuff. But if you just get off our back for a year or two and ease up on these absurd demands on IT, then we'll have the breathing space to be faster in fulfilling the stuff that you do decide as part of the portfolio. That's what we need to be doing today to deal with this future that's thundering down on us. We need to be changing to meet it at a human rate of change.
Can I pick that up then?
I'd like to address that. I sympathize and I understand and I agree with everything you're saying. And I think it's a very important message for people to have. But unfortunately, I do not believe that most people have the ability to go to their senior leadership and say, you need to do this, we need better portfolio management. They're not going to listen to us. Okay. And I think that comes from a severe lack of leadership. Most of the people I know are afraid from day to day that they're going to be let go or be fired if they don't do certain things. So I think it's a huge problem. To the point of personal digital experience and confusing that with business experience. I just want to address that because you've talked about that in your blog a few times, and that seems to be very important to you, and it's very important to me because I do believe it's a personal digital experience. But if you remember, we support personal computers. So let's really look at the word personal. And I think, you know, when we talk about the personal digital experience, why I believe it's driving so much change is A, I'm 44, and I think people who are between my age and maybe in their mid-50s, we're suddenly coming into positions of power. So we want what the executives had, because we're not quite at that rate, we're not at that level yet. So I think we're going to start to push that and want that. We're just in an awkward space-time now where what could be seen as a personal digital experience really is just our wishes as we come into power that we'll put into play. Now, what will be interesting is when our generation does get into some sort of leadership position, do we then allow people to have even crazier gadgets? And we go, hey, wait a minute, I was wearing sensors way before you were, and you know, take that nose ring out that's recording everything I'm saying. You know, I probably will be that guy, and I'll sound a lot like you. But I think right now the personal digital experience is, what? It wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't. Trust me, he might not have taken that. But that's just something we need to come to terms with. You know, IT being crushed in projects and all the wonderful advice, all I can say is I've been going to conferences now for 15 years. I've been listening to the same advice for 15 years, and I don't see a lot changing. I see a lot of organizations that get scooped up or merged or acquired. I've got friends in the room who have been a part of acquisitions, and it's just ugly. I just think we have such a massive leadership problem. I don't think it has anything to do with the people or the tech.
Can I take, I absolutely agree on the leadership. So when I say we, this has to happen as an industry.
Yeah, all of us.
You can't go to your
Remember,
board and say you guys are a bunch of idiots.
I said don't talk about customers like they're a tribe in Africa you observe.
Yeah, that's right.
They're us.
But we as an IT industry need to be driving this message. And it is happening, but it's happening at a human rate of change. So Sarbanes-Oxley said, how many years ago now? 15 years ago, boards, you are legally accountable for what's going on in IT. You must govern.
But human rate of change is also kind of a red herring because, you know, I'm just going to go there.
Because can I just finish my point first?
If you want to.
So we as an industry need to be getting the message up, and organisations like ISACA are starting to do that, but they're failing at doing it.
Because they're an organization.
So there needs to be some sort of initiative to do better at this. And I don't know what it is, but I agree with you. You can't go to your board. Well, you can try, but...
if you get fired, call me. I'll help.
Yeah, that's right.
Seriously, call me.
And then the second thing, you know, the personal digital experience thing again, that's the edge of real IT, okay? And the future is definitely knowledge workers bringing their own, as you say, device and being more independent about owning their personal tools, you know. So we're going back to stonemasons, right? Except we're knowledge masons, coming with our own equipment to each job. I'm cool with that. The real IT, that's the periphery. Those are the tools that are used to access the real IT. The real IT is the existing corporate investment in information and technology to run the business. And the personal digital experience is only the interface to that. It's the client. It's the, right? It's the desktop. However, although the desktop will be in the end of our finger or something, but it's just, so that stuff, absolutely. You know, let the millennials come along with their Google Glass. I don't care. That's just BYOD to me. That still isn't impacting what's going on the Unisys mainframe.
Could I just...
Sorry, so then
there's some questions that have come through, and they seem to be going the same way.
People have questions.
People have questions.
Thank you.
Which is really round about...
Because I was really tired of making up stuff. Like, I'm much better if you ask me a question. Like, how are you feeling? I don't like this. All right.
It's a lot of the usual stuff about, you know, is ITIL relevant, and we don't need to...
Oh, that's good.
But also, you know, what do we need to do now? And I suppose for the people in this room, where they are sitting, we're saying they need leadership. What do we actually mean when we say that? Who needs to do what? Can we spell it out?
I'll go first. I mean, you know, my journey has been remarkable and interesting, but it's been difficult. You know, there isn't a day I don't go by that I wonder, do I have a job today? Is it something I said? Is it something I shared or didn't share? Did I, you know, I had someone say to me once, you didn't reply to all, so how do we know? Well, because I cared about your time with your kids, so I didn't have reply to all. You know, I got written up for that, right? I literally got written up for telling someone not to use reply to all or not using reply to all. So, you know, for me personally, I can only define what leadership is. And that means I have to constantly do and say things. And I have a job just like you guys. I have a big company, you know, and I have to do things that I don't agree with. But when I feel strongly, where I'm willing to say I'm probably going to get written up or possibly fired, I have to err on the side of it takes a few people to do drastically difficult things to move the needle. And I think if we don't start standing up for each other and covering each other's backs, I mean, I know a lot of people who said to me, well, Chris, if I do that, you know, I'm not going to get a job. And I said, I will get you a job. Stand up. Then they do it. And it usually works out for the good. Now, there's only been a few cases. I don't know anybody who spends as much time in HR as I do. But it is a human resource department. There are, you know, HR is a tool for us. You know, when you want change in your organization, I actually encourage you, you know, if you're afraid, go to HR and say, this process is broken, and I'm afraid there'll be backlash if I try to fix it. So leadership, I'll just end on, is a very personal thing. It's a very scary thing, and I don't think it's for everyone, but I think you're more capable of it than you give yourselves credit for.
So I completely agree with that. I think,
but you shouldn't. It's a debate.
But leadership comes from two sides, right? So there's your own personal leadership, and I completely agree. The other side is the industry. So, you know, I think IT is very comparable to finance. You can draw strong analogies with finance and sometimes with HR in terms of the fact that and particularly in the trend for where IT is going. You know, IT is not going away, but we are the centre of expertise within the organisation for the ownership of information technology and the management of information technology. So just like finance doesn't spend the money, but they're the control and the centre of excellence and policy for money, and HR don't, in some organisations don't do all the hiring, right? But they set the policy for hiring in exactly the same way. That's what IT is going to be for. Even if the business is off doing their own IT, someone needs to be setting policy and control and centre of excellence and skills, right? So that's what we're going to be for. As an industry, we're nowhere near where, say, the accountants are at. right? So GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, right? Chartered accountants. You know, there are these structures in place, there's this socially agreed policy that applies across the whole of each society to say these are our generally accepted accounting principles. This is how we work in finance. You know, and we need this stuff in IT. We need to be standing up both as individuals but also as an industry to say these are the generally accepted IT principles. This is how every organisation should work, including the governance of IT. And we need to be accrediting our professionals in the same way that accounting does, to say, as finance does, to say these are accredited IT professionals. And we have the representative bodies that stand up to say, we represent the IT profession. Now in the UK, you're quite well served there, better compared to some countries. In the US, it's a debacle. It's all over the place like a madman's breakfast, right? But, and in other countries, it's spotty, it's in between. We need to be stronger at representing ourselves as an industry, standing up as a body and saying, this is how it ought to work, in order to back up those individuals.
Chris is shaking his head at that.
Well, no, I just, I've read on your blog, I'm an avid fan, as you know, that we need something like generally accepted accounting principles. I think that's the last thing we need. Accounting, once you get principles, that stated, you literally can rob banks without leaving your desk. And I think the minute we create something so structured in IT that we can create an us and them state more polarizing than what we have now, we might as well just all leave. I will do doom and gloom at that point.
How do you rob a bank from your desk because of generally
Have you heard of high-frequency trading? High-frequency trading. So generally accounting principles have allowed a system of governance and taxation and transfers of funds that is basically what we would have called in the 1800s bank robbing.
That's not GAAP that's allowed that. That's corporate, that's government regulation of the banking industry, which isn't GAAP. GAAP says how you behave as an individual accountant.
But because we have such a defined structure, those loopholes are allowed to be created.
Yeah, but then we address the loopholes.
But we don't. We're humans. We're greedy and nasty and ugly to each other.
So, I mean, earlier on you mentioned doing away with process, because it's kind of coming round to this. Is that because process just can't work in the new world, or is it because it's not worked properly, which I think...
I'd like to know what you replace it with.
Well, I don't think you should get rid of all the ITIL processes and all the things that we've spent all these years doing. That's not what I'm advocating at all. I just think we need to remove from them. It's just very simple. We need to look at them and take as much away. Devops has this concept of minimal viable product, and I'm studying something right now called minimal viable human. And that means when you create systems of interaction, you put just enough interaction there for someone to paint their face on it. So if you have a smiley face, 2 dots on a circle, and you've got a fully, fleshed out face that someone's painted that looks very realistic, given those two choices, people will always go to the one where they can imprint themselves onto. So I think our processes are a lot like that. They were designed in a time where we had very full departments, we had budgets, we had those sorts of things. And I think in today's world, I won't say the real one, because obviously I don't live in the real world, we need to actually take away from those processes. And I wouldn't advocate getting rid of them, although personally I would. I mean, if I had a company, I would rip every process out and say, make it work together, and if you can't, then maybe we shouldn't be in business.
I think one of the things I say in Standard Plus Case is that concept of allowing people to level up to be a caseworker. And one of the things that's implicit in that is, look, I'm sorry, but there are some people who are never going to be a caseworker. So DevOps and Agile and a lot of these philosophies take a very rosy view of human nature and are postulated on the existence of multi-skilled, highly professional, properly motivated and ethical people, which are wonderful resources when you can find them. But Dilbert's Wally, there are Wallies out there, and there are not enough wonderful people in the world to completely staff every IT department represented in this room. It just doesn't happen. So you need to have systems in place where you do liberate the people who are entitled to be liberated.
But didn't you earlier say we created an entitlement state? So I'm just hearing of some flip-flopping.
There's no flip-flopping there at all. Nice try.
I know you like that word.
So we need to accredit the people who are worthy of that level of trust, that we can liberate them from process. But the implicit thing there is that the controls and the processes are in place for the wallies. They're in place for the people that you would be insane to trust as a caseworker, right? And either because, I mean, the world is full of people who are either lazy or unethical or whatever, and you cannot drive them all out of your organisation. It's also full of people who are just too junior and unskilled at this point to be making it a caseworkers. They have a future as a caseworker, and we can grow them, but that also doesn't mean that you set them free right now, because they'll just hurt themselves and hurt you. So we still need the process, we still need the controls in place, and we need a mechanism in place to allow people to be a caseworker, to be liberated from that when they prove themselves worthy of that.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, just rounding up. And one thing there, you both mentioned DevOps. How many people in the room know what DevOps is? Okay.
Can I do my DevOps in 30 seconds? Or
See Rob later for Dev. But it's an important point because we're talking about it, and actually the penetration of knowledge about it isn't that great. Just as a takeaway, just from this session, what do you think people need to be doing now? What one takeaway from this event that you would say service desk managers, service desk people should be doing now to prepare for that new world? Whether they live in the your world or your
The
world.
real world.
Do you want me to? I'll go
Whichever,
first.
whichever world you live in.
I'll go
what
first this time
takeaways
and you
from
can
this,
wrap up.
from this event should you be thinking about?
So right away, go and read about DevOps. And read the Phoenix project is probably a good way, a very accessible way to learn about DevOps. But like I said, just don't drink Kool-Aid. Yeah, that would be the facetious answer. I'm staggered by the number of hands that didn't go up. You need to know about DevOps because it is going to influence the future. But otherwise, the one thing to take away, I think, is that understanding that our role is to protect and serve. And it's okay not to serve all the time. It's okay to be a professional and say, look, just like a CFO would, to say, look, I'm sorry, but what you are proposing would be damaging to the organisation. It's fiscally irresponsible, and I don't think you should have the funds to do that. In the same way, IT, we should feel entitled to stand up and say, excuse me, but I think you are endangering our existing information and technology assets with what you are proposing. And I want to escalate this to the appropriate levels for them to understand the risks of what you're suggesting. And if they then say, no, we're going to do it anyway, then okay, I want it in writing that I said I didn't think this was a very good idea.
I think you should go back to work and do what you've been doing. You know, I don't know if you should read DevOps. I don't know if you should try to look up more terminology that you can use against each other and create this system of what you believe in and what you don't. It doesn't seem to work in my life. I do believe you can go back to your work because you are about to come into power or know people who are in power, and you're going to be able to influence them. And you're going to be able to steer them with information that they didn't have access to 2 decades ago or a decade ago. You have access to more information now than you probably need, and that's probably healthy for you. And that can be a burden, but can also be used for good. And I think it's up to each one of you to understand the information that you have access to and to use it in the best possible way in service to each other, in service to the people on the desk, in service to the people all over the company. So one thing that seems to be missing, and it goes back to the leadership theme, I believe you all are capable of doing this. I think what's missing from these conferences are sessions on how to make you feel empowered, how to make you feel special, how to make sure you know that you can do this. And if you feel you can't, these are the resources. You don't need surveys, you need mentors. Thank you.
Just to wrap up, we have...
That was the wrap up.
That was the wrap up. I'd like to thank both parties for being such good sports.
Both Barclays?
Both Barclays, all three Barclays.
All three Barclays.
Just
let's do this.
Voting has been consistently slow. Hasn't changed much at all through the event. If any of you still want to have a last-minute vote, please do so now. But I think on the voting of the day, Rob, I'm going to have to declare Chris the winner. But thank you very much.
Well, I mean, I just want to answer that real quick. I'm a huge, my entire career as a person outside of a real company, not real life, is because of a few people. People like Malcolm Fry and Howard Kendall and Rob England and Barclay Ray and many of you in here. So debate or no debate, we are in this together and we will solve this together. And I believe that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.